Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Founders Network. I'm James O'Dannison and I'm really thrilled today to be joined by Maya Bogle, CEO and co-founder of Talent House.
Well, you've promoted me because I'm not actually CEO, I'm just a co-founder, but
Okay.
if you want to call me that too, that's absolutely fine. But Claire, the CEO, might have something to say about that.
Okay, yeah, well, that's the thing. A lot of people are CEOs of themselves, but I've given you promotion, so it's been a great day. You can have a podcast and a promotion wrapped into one.
No, it's so funny. I actually got to the point, James, where I thought I can bring the most value knowing what I'm good at and also knowing what I'm really bad at. And that's the beauty of age, because it just brings tons of experience and hopefully no ego with it.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy to step aside and have a lovely C-suite of people around me doing all the really important operational stuff, making those big decisions, looking at balance sheets and spreadsheets, which for me makes me go wobbly at the knees, not in a good way.
I can imagine, the same as me as well. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, people who start businesses, they're probably quite crazy to start a business or even attempt to start it. So when it comes down to the details, it's best to outsource that to people who are really smart and detail orientated. I know that's the case in my case.
Totally agree. I think I've got some lovely unique abilities, but I've got a whole suite of other abilities which are absolutely shocking. You don't want them anywhere near your business when you're trying to run it. So over time, I've been very happy to step sideways and say, I'll keep my co-founder hat on and do what I can to build the business, to build partnerships, to open big doors, to do things like this, but not get in the way of running the company day to day or having lots of people reporting into me because they think I was a nightmare.
Yeah, besides it. And I really wanted to get you on the show because, we're an agency ourselves and dealing in this space, I'm just intrigued to find out a lot more about what you guys do with Talent House, what you do. And you have a very unique perspective, I suppose, at a macro level about the community in terms of the community you're building, in terms of the creative community you're building. So I think it'd be great for the audience to find out, I suppose, in your words, like what's the mission of Talent House? What do you guys do? And what's the vision for the future?
Wow, that's a lot. I'll try to break it up because I might drive people a bit crazy. So Talent House is now part of TLNT Holdings, which is actually 3 different platforms. And those 3 platforms are talenthouse.com and ello.co, ELLO.co, and Zupa.com, not to be confused with Zoopla, the house property site, but Zupa is a very high-end filmmaking community of high-end video producers and filmmakers. So there's 3 companies and we don't view ourselves as an agency. So I think a lot of people think Talent House or TLNT is an agency. We're not. We're a platform with this incredible global community of creatives. And those creators for us, James, are everything to us. They are the things which make me want to get up in the morning and sing in the morning. They fill me with pride and joy. And between our 3 companies, we've been kicking around now for 12 years. We've probably made every mistake in the book, but we stuck to our guns in believing that creativity is incredibly powerful and so important in shaping the way people feel about everything.
Of course. And I suppose on that note of creativity, I suppose now more than ever, we're looking for creative ideas. And, for us as an agency, we're always struggling with finding creativity and understanding what that is. So I'd be interested to see, I suppose, what's your take on, I suppose, codifying creativity? Is it something you can build, or do you have to just find people who are naturally creative, in terms of like trying to get that process in an organization?
And that's a really interesting question, because a lot of people have looked at the way that we work and the campaigns that we run and how we can often produce thousands of pieces of creative work, original and diverse, to one brief. And a few people have said to me, do you think you can commoditize creativity? Can you actually turn it into a commodity? I don't think you can. I think there is something absolutely beautiful and unique about a creative idea and a creative perspective. So I don't think you can actually commoditize it. I think you just have to celebrate it and nurture it. And we do believe a great idea can come from anywhere.
And on that note, it's just, and particularly now, I suppose we could address the elephant in the room with what's happening now. what's your take on, the industry, to how do we adapt to these changes? 'Cause a lot of people are, there's certain camps who are saying this is really bad for creatives and the agency space, but there's certain people saying actually no, now is it's kind of the sounding horn for brilliant campaigns and brilliant ideas to kind of permeate through what is a very emotional time for everyone. And obviously checked out some of the campaign work you're doing around kind of galvanizing other creatives to help the UN. So I was seeing kind of what's your take on the environment now, and how we respond as kind of creatives and agency owners and providers moving forwards.
Absolutely. I think it's a pretty scary time for most people. I think a lot of agencies have had to literally shut down and have not been able to produce, to create, to go on shoots. They've had shoots cancelled, campaigns pushed back and cancelled. They've had lots of freelancers that would have worked on those shoots literally out of work. There's a huge amount of furloughing within our industry. Talking to a lot of the big media owners, a lot of them are consistently saying revenues down by anything from 30% to over 50%. And so there has had to be a real, almost, sharp drawing in of breath. It's a bit like, crikey, how can we keep this industry going? And I do think initially everything sort of went on pause for a bit. And across our TLNT campaigns, we did see several campaigns push back, a couple cancel, some just go, whoa, we're just not going to book. So it was pretty terrifying those first few weeks. We thought, crikey, how are we going to get through? How are we going to support the cash flow issues, which now look it's enormous in front of us? So I think, like everyone, we too, and the whole industry, had to sort of draw breath, think, what do you do? And my view, James, is that actually in recessions or in pandemics, as we are now, or in any form of economic downturn, it's actually really important for brands to retain a presence in market. 100%. And if you want to maintain that market share, you've got to build that brand sentiment. You have to keep being there for people, particularly when so many people are living in fear. Think about it, James. There's people thinking about fear of loss of life, loss of home, loss of job, loss of income, loss of status, loss of their businesses that they've built. So there's a huge amount of instability right across our industry, and that sort of ripples into so many other industries which we can touch on too. So it's a pretty scary time out there, but I do think there's hope out there as well.
Yeah, it's spot on about the, I think, attacking whilst others are defending. And also, in recessionary environments and times when things are tough, I think if you are seen to be there for whoever your community is, then people will remember that. And it's really easy to just, I suppose the impulse is to retreat. And we noticed it when we had, the initial shock of everyone leaving the office. It's really disorientating, and people saying, pause everything. It gets to the point where I think the fear can actually become more damaging for your business than actually just saying, you know what, let's try something here. We've noticed that actually people do want to hear from people during these times, and if you kind of change your perspective away from, from a branding and suppose marketing perspective, we may not close business in this process for a few months, but let's build that well of really goodwill and sentiment and education. So when things come up again, they will do, we're in that primary position where everyone else was just kind of curtailing and hiring. So it's almost like it doesn't feel right going on the offensive sometimes. You want to defend, but that's precisely what you should be doing.
Yeah. So we've had to sort of think about, in those first few weeks, it's scary, not just because there's a pandemic, because you then look to the business and you look to the balance sheet. But then we thought, actually, we have got this extraordinary community, a community which is over 4 million community members across our 3 platforms, and more millions across socials too. And then in terms of the community itself, there are over 1 million people who are actually creatives. So by a creative, I mean someone who's a photographer or a filmmaker or a designer or a musician, etc. And so we thought this community, which is in 195 countries, are used to working from home. They're used to working remotely. They're not part of that sort of agency structure. So bizarrely enough, James, it actually made us realise that there was an opportunity, and I don't like to talk about sort of opportunities because this is a horrible thing, that this pandemic's going to have so many casualties, so many people who've lost their jobs or lost incomes or lost homes or lost lives, even worse. So I don't think there's a lot to celebrate, but for us, we did pivot our pitch and we recognised that there was an opportunity for us to go to our brand partners and say to them, you do need to be a market. You need to be there for your consumers, for your customers, and for that global community of creatives. You can give them an opportunity to say, look, guys, right now you're suffering. The world of freelance creatives is really under duress, like a lot of other industries. And we want to give you an opportunity to work with our brand. And by doing that, the brand can actually show that they care. They can be in market. They can actually garner and celebrate new creative work, which is going to be brand appropriate during a pandemic.
Yes.
Because clearly, a lot of that pre-existing work, you can't run that. A lot of the pre-existing work would have just been so wrong, insensitive, awful, off-brief, off-brand, to suddenly push some of that through your channels. But you can't go to your agency to get new work. But you can go to a remote community of creators, which we've built, to actually give you new work during a pandemic, which is on brief and on brand.
And on the topic of briefs and how you kind of continue to create in this environment. Obviously, we've seen like the memes now of like generic company video, sad music, voiceover of a man saying like, "We're here for you in these difficult times." And like it's really cliched thing. And like, do you think there's a risk of brands? Is it better to stay silent and I'm not silent, but just be conservative in terms of like how you deal with this really complicated emotional issue, authentic, and in the process of being authentic, perhaps ruffling some feathers, because if you are honest, you may offend some people? Or do you think it's best that there is a kind of tried and trusted, we're here for you creative campaign thing, which, will get a few thumbs up, but fundamentally people know it's just corporate talk?
Yeah, it's a really tough one to get right, and I think a lot of it would depend on the individual brand and the sort of work that they've been running to date. So we actually saw, in response to United Nations brief that we ran and we hosted on talenthouse.com, it was phenomenal. They came to us and said, look, we've got a real issue here. We want to communicate to the world all those WHO health preventative messages that we need to get out there, but not just in a boring public service broadcast way. We want stunning creative, which is going to both inform and unite. It's going to help people feel kindness, solidarity, and everything. And in response to that brief, we actually had some brands submitting some of their work. And one came through for, I think it was for Star Alliance. And it was really interesting because the airline industry, if you imagine, was hit the hardest probably of any industry. And you could argue, what the heck is an airline going to be saying during a pandemic when no one's flying? And it was actually really beautifully shot film. And it was literally just saying, right now you can't fly, right now you have to stay home, you have to stay safe, but you will be able to get back out there. So just hang on in there and just wait. And it was actually, I mean, that's a very much paraphrasing, it was beautifully shot. And so, and I thought it's quite a lovely piece of film. But you're right, James, there were so many films of just dark voiceovers and empty streets and all the rest of it. And I do think brands have got to be part of the conversation. I think if you withdraw completely and then you come back in out of the pandemic and say, hey, I'd like to sell you a can of X or Y or a packet of this, or persuade you to go for a test drive in a car. It's like, well, okay, but where were you for the last 3 or 4 months? I don't feel that you really cared or that you really did anything for me. And part of that doing something for a consumer could just be about reassuring them. And I think a lot of people needed that.
And I think one of the things I really loved about the campaign, it'd be good if you expand upon the campaign, is this idea, and we do it a lot, around advocacy. And, actually having this, moving away from a one-way kind of monologue, which is what most brands do, is they have a monologue and they just say, this is da-da-da-da, and moving towards more of a dialogue, a two-way dialogue, where the process of creation itself is the creation is almost part of the campaign, and it's encouraging your advocates, whether it's customers, stakeholders, staff, to actually take ownership over pieces of this creative. And we do, you know, with our stuff, we always encourage our clients to involve their people with their creation, and that in itself is amazing content. And that's what one of the things, you know, it'd be quite good if you could expand upon the whole campaign you did, and kind of the response, which was fantastic.
Oh my God, James, it probably was it was the most important campaign I've ever worked on in my life, and it may well be the most important campaign I ever do work on. It was a complete honour working directly with the United Nations Strategy Hub based out of New York and also San Francisco. They came to us because they wanted to use creativity as a way to mobilise the world into taking positive action. So action around the health preventative steps you should take around hygiene and physical distancing, but also really lovely messages unifying the world around solidarity, kindness, donation, and that reassuring sort of creative work. Because a lot of people are just scared, and the reality is, James, it still isn't over. You know, no one yet knows what's going to happen when it really hits the favelas of Brazil or the slums of India or Africa. And, you know, where you can't physically distance, there isn't sort of hand wash in abundance. And they came to us, and it was extraordinary because we launched in 2 days. And work started rolling in from day one, and we closed 2 weeks later with nearly 17,000 pieces of multimedia creative work, from written copy to audio for radio. It was from 143 different countries and over 20 different languages. It was just so humbling. And there were 6 different briefs and a ton of work that came through. So we then built them a creative content hub. So if anyone wants to go and look at it, the work's all there to be looked at. You can download it, you can share it. The URL is unitednations.talenthouse.com. And so please go and have a look at it. You can search by message, by medium, and by language. It's stunning. But what I really like, James, is the whole model of open sourcing. So rather than, I hate saying crowdsourcing, because you wouldn't really go to the crowd to make your creative work. You go to the crowd to maybe share it, but you actually want to go to a curated community of creators to make creative work, not just me, because I'm not creative. I'm a dirty sales girl, really. But it was just amazing. The whole model is so different, because normally a brand would brief an agency, and that agency would say, okay, well, we've got money, we need to go and produce some work to the brief. But in our model, it's voluntary. So whenever that creator decides to respond to the brief and submit work, in essence, they are a brand advocate. So they've actually chosen to create work for that brand. And that, for me, is the start of a beautiful relationship and the start of a potentially beautiful piece of content marketing as well, because that creator made that work, they're vested in it, they're going to share it and talk about it.
Yeah, precisely. And I think that's where the model we're moving towards, because, you know, idea of movements online, of advocates of the crowd, and actually using new technology to actually discover these complete treasure troves of talent across the world, which previously would never have access to this channel to do that. And it's interesting, obviously, around I suppose the campaign brief for the UN. What's kind of the goal? What's the big outcome? What's the measure of success from everything? Is it an improvement in people's hygiene education, or how do you measure, codify what success was?
That's a really, really good question. So our biggest part of the role was to bring the work in. So was to, really invite our global community of creatives and other creatives that heard about the brief to actually submit work in response to one of the 6 different briefs that were hosted around hygiene, distancing, donation, solidarity, kindness, and also myth busting, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So the overarching goal of the campaign was to produce a body of multimedia creative work that could be used for multiple channels and multiple markets. So it had to really transcend borders and cultures and languages and mediums, because not everyone's got access to a laptop or to a television. And out of home is bigger in some areas, and then, you know, radio is huge in lots of territories around the country. So it needed to be multimedia, and it needed to be in many different types of languages too. So that was the goal of the campaign. And the first part of it was big tick, 17,000 bits of banging work, stunning, gorgeous, beautiful, diverse, from countries I've never even heard of. I was like, crikey, my geography must really suck, because I've got no idea where that place is. And the work was just amazing. Then it came to getting the work out. So that's where we were less able to get the work out. So that's where we've really been incredibly fortunate in getting, through the UN partnerships and through our own relationships, some incredible exposure through everything from campaign through to the drum, through to Ad Age and Ad Week and all our kind of industry people, but right through to big platforms and other media owners. So, for instance, We Transfer have been fantastic. They did a takeover of their sort of landing page on their We Present, which was amazing. We've had loads of different support from telephone networks in Africa through to your more conventional media distribution partners like Unsplash. Shutterstock, they want to do some work with us too. So we've actually had a lot of big players stepping in to say, we've got pipes, you've got the oil, effectively. Because what we do, we've got a minefield of creatives who produce stunning work. That's, to me, the oil of our industry. And the pipes can move and change, and you need certain types of pipes for certain types of, certain types of countries. So we've been looking to everyone for support. So even by being on with you now, James, that's support, because people might go to the URL to unitednations.talenthouse.com, pull some work out and share it across their channels.
Yeah, no, precisely. I think this is something the whole world can unify behind, because it's a world enemy, you know, it's an invisible enemy. And it's really interesting, because obviously from our perspective, marketing through this environment is as we discussed, it is precarious, but at the same time, you have to market still.
Yes.
Away from the big, I suppose the UN piece was very much like it's an advocacy cause-based campaign, whereas lots of marketing or agencies, you know, I've always been very bullish, saying to people, you ultimately you have the duty to provide for your staff and for your family, so you can't just shut down and stop business. I've had a few people complain, like, especially in the early days, like, oh, why are you promoting during Corona? Oh, you shouldn't be. And I think that's the wrong attitude. I think there is this kind of fear for brands to say, yeah, this is who we are, and we're still going to promote ourselves, because if you don't, then the whole thing just shuts down. So it's kind of finding that balance between being conscientious of the environment we're in, whilst also being able to advertise and continue to build pipeline for your new business team. So it's a really difficult juggling act to have.
Very much so. And I think it really does come back to this brand sentiment piece, which is, you know, a lot of people can't trade during a pandemic. A lot of people shouldn't be trading during a pandemic, but it's about just retaining that tone of voice and that brand sentiment. So if people feel that you were there for them, then when the market does return to normal, I think your instinct would be to go to those brands that you felt some sort of relationship with. I felt for some time now that the modern day consumer is far more like a producer and an editor. They're controlling who they engage with. That thumb is just going up and down news feeds all day long, and it's like, don't like it, not doing it, don't get it, just get out of my face. Through to, do you know what? That's really cool. So I do think brands have got to work a lot harder and with far more agility, far more authenticity, far more diversity, less badging. So you can't just slap a rainbow on your logo during Pride and say, woohoo, we care about the LGBTQ plus community. It's like, well, really, what do you do for the rest of the year? So I think, you know, we passionately believe in diversity. And the whole piece right now with the horrific murder of George Floyd, it's, you know, just for us, it brings home to us that we can celebrate our community. We do celebrate our community every day of the week. Our community is from every walk of life, every creed, every colour, every faith, every sexual orientation, and every income bracket. And that's something which we celebrated from day one with this huge community of creatives who stepped in to support the United Nations. And now if you look at across LO or across Talent House, you'll see all of our, our news feeds are flooded with beautiful BLM type messaging too. And it's not because we've asked them to, it's because they want to do it.
And it's a really good point. I think as business leaders, you always think, what can we do to help? And sometimes I see businesses trying to do things where you just, let's be honest, your business, this isn't your ballpark. You're not an NGO, you're not a community leader, if you're, to some businesses, so you don't have to be. But what I've always thought, what can you do? What can I do? Or what can we do as a business community? Well, ultimately, we provide jobs, opportunities for people. So rather than grandstanding and, you saying, putting a logo up and saying, oh, we're LGBTQ friendly, or we have a really strong gender equality mission here, or racial equality, just go and do it.
Just walk the walk and not talk the talk. And there's a lot of talking the talk right now, and it's like, really, and there's a few brands that were absolutely lampooned for some of the stuff that they did, particularly L'Oreal with the worth it comment and stuff, which was just, I feel actually terribly sorry for whoever decided to put that out on their socials, because it's backfired so badly. But I think it is difficult, and I think there are not necessarily any right or any wrong moves to do. You have to do what feels authentic for you. And I think sometimes it's fine to say, look, we don't know if we're getting this right. We're sure that we haven't got it right all of the time, but we feel that we should say something now, and this is what we feel. And if you feel it's authentically coming from a place of truth and honesty, then actually you will be forgiven, even if you kind of screw up a little bit along the way too, because it's very disarming to say I'm sorry. And actually, I just wish more people said I'm sorry. I say sorry every day.
And I think, well, it's because we've got certain, not to get too political, we've got certain leaders who I've never heard them say sorry for anything or own up to any mistakes, which is just going off a tangent. But I think you made a good point about, I think there's so much value in actually, when people ask about content or creative, actually the process of your thoughts behind why you're doing what you're doing, and almost trying to visualize the internal debate you're having about why you're doing this, and kind of like, it's almost the platforming of the topic is really important. So there's no easy answers here, but we want to find out how we can help, and this is kind of what we think. What's everyone's opinions? That comes across as way more honest. And I think the classic ad was Kendall Jenner with the Pepsi thing, and it just came across as so bad. And I think that's the shift, which, and it sounds like it's interesting to say, because I've heard it from other from other leaders in the space. It's moving to this kind of conversational, creative future rather than
So I totally agree, James. I think for me, it's a shift from monologue to dialogue. Back in the day of advertising, I've been kicking around this industry for over 30 years. You literally used to have a monologue. The brands would go away with their agencies, and 3 weeks, 3 months later, they come back with a strategy and with a big piece of da moment. Here's the work, and you shove a ton of money behind it, and you do that with your advertising. And you'd have just one piece of content, one hero piece of content, and a ton of money behind it, normally on television or press or out of home, those big mediums. I used to work in radio, which was tiny back in the day, but I loved it. And that was it. It was very easy. And then the guys would go away, rub their hands, oh, job done, tick box. And you can't do that now. And I really feel that those days have gone. And sure, you have things like the big Super Bowl ads and all the rest of it. And John Lewis seems to think it's okay just to do the one ad a year. I go nuts at them. And I spoke to Adam and Eve about it. Gosh, if they're watching this, I'm so sorry, guys. I know you've had a change of ownership and leadership, but maybe you might do this now. But it drives me nuts that they go away and they come back with just one piece of creative around Christmas. You go, oh, great. Okay, so I watched that on social. and that's it, is it? Thank you. If they'd given that brief to us around when they did the Elton John one, not last Christmas, the year before, all about fulfilling it. I'm sorry, I get really passionate about this.
That's
We
great.
we could have given them 500 or 1,000 little vignettes of making people's dreams come true with our community. And we could have given all that opportunity and exposure to those different creators in different markets around. I went into haberdashery, I'm now, dressmaker. I went into the cookware department. I'm now a famous chef. Well, it inspired me to cook, or inspired me to do makeup or design clothes, not just or sports department. And then obviously music too. Anyway,
Nice.
that's just my point of view, but I don't like that type of marketing.
No, I think you're spot on, because I think the power of the crowd and social media is democratizing information, and there's so much talent around the world. And as we go back to this point about this, previously you'd have this narrow ecosystem of creative, like I always use the Mad Men analogy, because that's obviously a hark back to 1960s advertising world, where it was just like, yeah, this big creative leader in a room, and they sit around and go, yeah, this is what we should do. And I mean, that's still, to be honest with you, that still happens a hell of a lot. I think that it happens more than I think people can imagine. Whereas what's really interesting about your platform is really with a push of a button, or a push of a few buttons, you can access the world, the creative brain of the world. I mean, not everyone, but I mean, it's really interesting. It's curious.
And it's humbling, James. It's just so humbling, because what's interesting, you put the same brief out, and 100 or 1,000 different creators will come back with 100 or 1,000 different ideas and interpretations, and they can all still be on brief and on brand. And it's that originality and diversity and freshness of thinking, which I really think, if you're a brand, you could also look at those creators as being your target market as well. So they're a really interesting group of people to engage in that collaborative co-creation process. So you're actually marketing to them at the same time as sourcing great creative work from them. So it's a double tick. Then if they then help you to distribute that work, that's 3 big ticks. Great target market, great source of original, fresh creative, and great source of distribution too.
Yeah.
That to me is, you can't get that if you just go to the 4, dare I say it, white men in the 4 walls of Madison Avenue or Soho or Shoreditch. And I know that's not true really of our industry, but as you said, I think if some of that still goes on, you talk to a lot of women in our industry at the senior level, there's a heck of a lot of women out there who just don't get paid the same as men.
Yeah, and I think it's technology and awareness which is revealing this. And it's just, I suppose, when you empower people, I suppose when you're creative, a lot of it comes from confidence. And if you never have the positive feedback of your work's actually been considered, or you've maybe not even got the pitch, but you've got somewhere, then you're reinforced to do the same behaviors. And just an example of other areas, if you're a woman and you've never had the feedback or confidence to go for a leadership role, you're just not going to do it. But it's the feedback of seeing your work, and things like the UN campaign. People go, "Whoa, that's a piece of art from Brazil. I can be a creative. I can get agency work based anywhere."
And what's so lovely is, I promise you, James, the thing I get the most excited about is the output of our community is incredible. Of course, it's stunning, it's diverse, it's fresh, it's beautiful. But it's the stories of the creators, which is amazing, and how we have given members of the LGBTQ plus, sorry, that was a mouthful, but the LGBTQ plus, you know what I'm saying, but the courage to create. We've got women who felt ostracized for their gender and their sexuality and their location, in Russia for argument's sake, who've now been successful and literally been selected 14, 15, 17 times for campaigns, who now can create. We've got creators in Mongolia who literally earned enough money from one of our initiatives with our brand, that was from Adidas, that they earned more money from that one project than they could in an entire year. We've got community members in the Philippines who bought houses for their family. So the empowerment and the inspiration and the collaboration and the exposure and the income that we've managed to give to our community is amazing. And that courage and confidence is all about the access that we can give them.
Yeah, and I studied at university, I studied international development, and one of the big things was access. So even there's structural things like the actually art of commuting in developing countries, actually physically commuting into work, is inherently negatively impacting for, just say, women, particularly in the developing world. Whereas, because now if you're working from home, you don't have to worry about childcare so much. Therefore, it gives you access to work because you don't have the structural inequality built into the system to prevent you from doing that. And I think it sounds like with what you're doing, you're kind of breaking down these structural limitations, which, whether it's for your gender, your ethnicity, your class, that's now been removed, because you could be Adidas in London, and you could connect with someone in, I don't know, Manila,
Yeah.
and that's something which could never have happened before. So I think that,
absolutely, yeah, I totally agree. And it is that sort of ability of democratizing creativity, allowing people to create safely from home. And right now, they're also, if you think about the carbon footprint, it would, an negative impact on an agency doing a shoot and flying people to all these different remote locations, when actually we can say, you don't need to do that. We've got creators in each of those cities that you need to shoot in. So actually, you don't need to be jumping on flights. You don't need to be damaging our environment. It's actually far more ecologically friendly to allow people in each of those remote locations to create remotely. So still keep your big idea, your big strategy within an agency. This would be my wish for how our industry would change. If it was me and I was running a big agency, I'd fire a lot of people. I'm so sorry, team. That sounds awful. I shouldn't be talking about firing anyone right now because I've got people losing their jobs, so forgive me. But I think when I say that, what I mean is that I would actually just keep the best people in-house, your best strategists, your best planners, your almost like a McKinsey type, Boston consultancy group type environment where you've got brilliant people, brilliant executive creative directors, brilliant strategists saying this is where the brand needs to go. This is what this brand stands for. Let's come up with some hero idea and, thinking around that creative strategy. But then work with someone like our group, where we've got creators in every market you'll ever need to create in, and do that through the platform.
Yeah.
And that is the way that the industry, I hope, will start to move, and just allow all of those people who maybe don't work within an agency to work remotely and start doing more consultancy stuff.
Yeah, because you could literally say, okay, I want to film in Colombia. I want to get theoretically 2 minutes of footage from, a city in Colombia, people walking and talking. I want it to be in a coffee place, and I want to get this footage, rather than sending 3 people out to film it. You could get the brief, people would pitch, and then how would it, so then they would just send the footage
in through our platform. So we've got a brilliant, the architecture of talenthouse.com and Zuba.com is just phenomenal. It allows brands to have their own back-end dashboard. We can actually create our own branded content studios. We're looking at launching a sort of youth platform, because we recognise at the moment you can only submit to a project if you're over 18, but we know that brands and creatives under the age of 18 want practice. They want to cut their teeth on real-world, real-time live briefs. So we're actually working very closely with the Design and Technology Association, which really focuses on trying to get the creative curriculum sorted out in primary and secondary schools. We're working closely with them to see how we can actually build out a platform which is safe, lots of brand safety, so no alcohol, no tobacco, nothing sort of inciting violence or anything else, but really cool, safe brand briefs. And to give that opportunity to an 11-year-old or a 13-year-old is phenomenal. And we also know that brands want to engage that younger market. So we're looking at really evolving our offering. We're looking at building out more branded hubs themselves. They can have their own sort of curated community of creators by market, by creative, discipline. And the youth piece we think is really interesting too. And we're also looking at how we can actually build out the influence of our community. Because I think, for me, influencer marketing is a little bit of a dirty word or expression now. But I think if you've got a creator who's made that work, and they share it and talk about it, that artistic, authentic influence is really interesting. And that's the sweet spot we want to focus on.
And that leads me very smoothly on to my I suppose the big wrapping up question for me is, where's the future for the platform? And it sounds like you kind of partially answered it already, but what's your vision for, I suppose, what's your big vision? Like where are you now and where are you going to be in a year, 2 years, the platform?
I would like to think that we will encourage more creators from all over the world to join our community, to know that they can upload their work, they can have their work seen, loved, recognised. They can work if they wish to with brands. It's not compulsory to submit work to a brand brief. We're also doing more of what we call black book or private briefs, where we actually don't do big open briefs. So when you look at our sites, there's a lot of work that you won't see, which is hidden. And that's when we just work on behalf of a brand who just wants to go to a handful of creators by market or by creative discipline. So I think for us, the future will look, I hope, with a bigger creative community across all the territories. If we're in 195 markets, I think there might be 2 or 3 that we haven't hit yet. I'm not quite sure where they are though. And so build the community, nurture that community, find out what they want. How can we help them? What kind of tools can we give them for inspiration, learning, recognition, access? So we're looking at even some ways that we can look at providing a better banking structure for them. We share a primary shareholder with another company called Omnio, which has got a brilliant B2B payment system, which would allow us to actually get more money more quickly into the hands of our community without the heinous fees of PayPal or WeTransfer, or not WeTransfer, is it WeTransfer? I think whatever it is. TransferWise, beg your pardon, not WeTransfer, sorry. So we just want to, and obviously bank fees are horrific. So lots of things we can do for the community. Then outside of that, we want to work with more brands, more agencies, more media owners and say, we can help. We're here to help. We're not arrogant. Collaboration and creativity is in our DNA. So welcome into our house and come and play.
Well, I, as an agency owner myself, I think I definitely, would love to do some work with you and the team. And I think it's really exciting. And we'll put the information, I think everyone should check out the work you've done with the UN. I think it's really amazing. And
thank you.
And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on, James. It's been really lovely, and I hope to get to meet you one day too, post-pandemic and all that kind of stuff. But thank you so much. Take care.